Hi, this is Christine. It is Monday, November 9, 2015. It's in the morning. It's pretty early actually. I just woke up, so my voice probably doesn't sound the best. Hi, good morning, if I can even call it that. It is early and I just woke up. I had another dream last night, and that is why I'm not sure if it is such a quote-unquote good morning. But I am thankful for another day. In this dream, I was in a castle somewhere over in Europe, and it was like the 1400s or so, with knights and peasants, etc. There was apparently a lord or master of the house or of the castle, and he was a dark lord. He wore a long black cape with a hood on it, and the hood went over his head, and he didn't walk. He seemed more to glide across the floor, and when you looked at his face in his hood, there was nothing but a black empty space, or a void. He seemed to be more of a dark spirit rather than an actual person, and the cape over him was what made him look solid or gave him a shape, so he could quote-unquote walk or glide around in the world. Most of the time he was gone from the castle, out working somewhere in the world, which makes me think of like roaming to and fro. But there was notification from one of his upper management staff that the master or the lord was coming back home and was returning to his castle again. There was a man with me. I have a feeling it was my father or my dad in real life who was with me in this dream. My dad's name in real life is actually Arthur, so that makes me think of someone like King Arthur from history. But it seems like my dad was some type of nobleman back then, and I was his daughter back then as well, and he and I wore silver. I had a silver gown on from the 1400s back then, and my father was dressed in silver knight's armor. He was some type of a warrior. This lady, who was like the head housekeeper of the castle, told my dad and me to get upstairs to our rooms, like an upper chamber, because my dad and I both had our own rooms in this castle, and I don't even know where we were or why we were in this castle or why we lived there if we did. You know, if we lived there, why were we there? Were we prisoners there, held against our own will? I don't know. But it seemed like in heart he and I didn't really want to be there, but we had to be there, and we lived there anyway. This Dark Lord or Master of the house seemed to be a very negative, critical, nasty spirit that no one liked to be around, and that was why he was gone a lot from the castle. He was roaming the earth and was searching through it, no doubt for more souls to capture and imprison in his castle. My guess is he needed to harness the light off of these souls or people so he could keep them in his castle in order to have something to drain their energy off of or feed off of for himself. So people were really there just to be fed upon, to get their light and life off of them. He was like an emotional vampire. And my dad and I were dressed in silver, so we shone pretty brightly, our light did. The head housekeeper told us both to hurry up and get upstairs to our rooms, and to hide under our beds and don't come out. I went upstairs to where our rooms supposedly were in the castle, but both rooms looked just like my room and my sister's room from my parents' house. My bedroom was apparently my father's assigned room, and my sister's room in my parents' house was apparently my assigned room. And both rooms were modern day looking, just like how they were when I grew up. They did not look 1400s at all. It was so strange, but they were located in the castle. and the rest of the castle looked like 1400s. I don't know where my dad was. I felt he was around somewhere, but I didn't see him, and he was not in his bedroom yet to hide before the Dark Lord made it back home. So I got on my hands and knees and looked from the hallway to see if one of the Dark Lord's men would ever come up to my father's room or my room, and if they knelt down on their hands and knees, would they be able to see my father and me hiding underneath our beds? Because, would we be easily visible to them? Under my bed in my actual bedroom, from where I grew up, that was supposed to be my father's assigned room, there was not much room under my bed, and I wondered and worried if my father, with all of his silver knight armor, and this is knight Knight, like knights of old, with his knight armor on, would even be able to squeeze himself under that bed, because it looked like he wouldn't be able to, and that there wasn't much room underneath there. Then I stood up, and while still standing in the hallway, moved over to my sister's room, and I got back on my hands and knees there in the hallway and looked under my sister's bed to see if there was a lot of room underneath there. I noticed that I would be able to slip underneath that bed easily, because there was more room underneath there, and I would still have room to breathe, so to speak. But I also noticed that because there was so much room, that if one of the Dark Lord's men did the same thing, got on his hands and knees in the hallway to look underneath the bed, that he would see me and find me there, and then I would be caught. So I decided not to hide under the bed anyways, despite what the head housekeeper had told me. Next, I found myself moving slowly toward a tunnel, head first, and it was like I was laying on my back, and it was like I was floating on a slow-moving stream of water. I was still in the 1400s clothing, and I was moving down the pipe. I noticed the upper part of the pipe had holes and animal-shaped designs in it. It was dark blue also, like how outer space has stars in the sky that make up the constellations, which are, like, some of them are animals. So that's kind of what it looked like, these animal shapes. And the fact that the upper part of the tunnel or pipeline was dark blue, it kind of looked like the night sky. And then, the light coming in from the outside would have been the light from the room outside, or how stars shine in a dark night. I noticed the upper part, the constellations, and it was through these holes that light came into the pipe or tunnel I was laying in and was floating in, downhill, head first on my back, because I needed to get downstairs from the castle and from my upper chamber bedroom, but I couldn't go down the stairs or be obvious about it. So I used this secret pipeway to try and get out of the castle. I was going to make a run for it and get out of the castle instead of trying to hide myself somewhere in it where the Dark Lord would be trying to find me, because no doubt that is what he was trying to do, was to find me and my dad to feed off of us again. As I looked out of the quote-unquote constellation holes in this upper covering of the pipe that I was traveling down or floating down, I saw a gymnasium through the holes, like what you would see in a junior high school, and people in that gymnasium, again, all dressed in 1400s clothing. It was still the castle, but it had a modern-day junior high school gym floor and bleachers in it for sports games, like basketball games, etc. I made it out of the pipe undetected. I made it down to the bottom, and then went looking for back hallways and exit doors to get out of the building, and then I was going to make a run for it out into the wilderness somewhere. I did not know anymore where my father was, but I had a feeling that either he had made a run for it also on his own, or that he had decided to hide somewhere in the building. But I felt like he had made a run for it also, because on his own terms, so I didn't know if I would see him again. And also, he was not the type to run and hide. So he would have either made a run for it or he would have just fought to the death. So my guess is that he also tried to escape, but I didn't know where he was in the castle. If I did escape, we would run into each other again eventually, I was sure, somewhere outside of the castle in the wilderness, and he would just come get me on his horse and we would take off and ride off together. But we would have to get out of the castle separately in order to reunite outside somewhere later. The outside grass and mountains looked very much like old Europe, where historic castles sit still today, and people go there to visit these castles. So I think this castle exists somewhere over in Europe from the picture I saw in my dream and from the grass in the mountains that I saw outside of the castle itself. I stood up once I got to the end of the pipeline and had made it back down to the ground floor from being upstairs where the bedrooms were. I also knew I had to be sneaky because these people in the gymnasium were loyal to the Dark Lord, and if they saw that I was trying to escape, I would be in big trouble, so I stayed quiet and tried to get out stealthily. I found back tunnels and walkways in the castle. They were stone and concrete, sort of like how you would see a stone castle over in Europe, because that is what castles of old were built, like using stones back then. And the tunnel or walkway looked a little like the back hallways where janitors of a school would work and walk. It was not the most appealing looking tunnel to walk through at all. It was kind of damp and dusty and moldy, actually. But I was just happy that it was a secret passage of some sorts, and I hoped that it would eventually lead me out of this castle. So far I had not been detected, and I did not know if the Dark Lord had arrived yet back at his castle. But once he did arrive and realized my father and I were missing, I knew that a search would start of the castle, so I knew I had to get out of there quickly. One of the doors led me to another type of gymnasium room, the doors of the hallways, only this room seemed like it was a gymnasium used for a hall or a banquet or a place for people to congregate for meals and dancing, like celebrations. It was not really set up for basketball games or sporting events like the other gymnasium looked like, that had actual people in it, like live people walking around in it. I stepped into this second gymnasium room through the doorway, but I didn't walk fully into the gymnasium. I was more curious at what this room was. I then saw people standing against the back wall on the other side of the gymnasium. They looked like they were dressed as modern-day people, but they were stiff, standing almost like mannequins or wax figures, and no one was moving. It seemed like they were frozen, or they were the standing dead. I saw a ball and chain hanging from the rafters of this gymnasium. It was hanging down close to the ground, but instead of the ball being one of those big black cannonball type of balls that you would swing on a chain, and it was huge, I swung it at the people to wipe them out, so to speak, and knocked them over as if the ball was a bowling ball swinging from the air, and the people standing there like wax figures were bowling pins. I swung the ball and hit the people and knocked them over to the ground. Some of them shattered in pieces, but then they came back to life and their body pieces began to reassemble, and they started walking towards me like zombies with their hands outstretched in front of them. No wonder this gymnasium was not used. It was a storage room for dead people, and no doubt they were dead because the Dark Lord had his dances and banquets there, and these poor people were probably the meals. This was just the craziest dream last night. So I realized I had to do something to get these people to stop coming after me, because quite frankly they were ugly looking. I mean, a dead, decaying corpse walking towards you with lifeless eyes and hands outstretched towards you. The huge ball and chain I had originally used to knock the people over now, because it became a huge green pear. Yes, a fruit, I know, on a chain. So I swung this huge pear that was on the chain at the people and again knocked them over like bowling pins. And I did that 2 more times until everyone was knocked over and they weren't walking towards me anymore. It is a good thing that I grew up bowling in real life, so I knew how to knock over bowling pins. Once everyone was knocked down back on the floor, I took off from the gymnasium and found another hallway that I was hoping would lead me outside. I found a door and exit and an exit door with a sign above it with the words exit in red capital letters, like what you would find in a school or other building. But I felt like this door might not open if it did, and it wouldn't lead to grass outside of the castle, but rather to an overhang high up on the castle wall, and I would not be able to jump out of it, lest I jump out of it to my death. So I didn't open the door for not wanting to possibly set off a fire alarm and give notice to where I was in the building. I then saw another tunnel going off of this room I was in, and I decided to take it. There was a water bath or pool of some sort, like a jacuzzi, but the water was calm and clear in it. I knew I was going to have to swing over it or jump over it to get to the other side. So I did. I swung over it and then kept walking down that tunnel. I don't know where my dad was or if he ever made it out. I don't know if I ever made it out. I hope I did. I don't know if the Dark Lord ever came back to his castle, although I did see him in the spirit in the gymnasium with the people, like the sporting gymnasium. He was gliding on the gymnasium floor as he was walking with all of the people in the gymnasium, in their 1400s clothing, bowing down to him and worshiping him. They were definitely his followers, but they were also dead, sort of, meaning they seemed to be in some type of trance. And that is why he was okay with them hanging around him, because, they were under his spell, under his trance. It was the people who would not bow down to him or worship him, or who were not under his trance or spell, that he wanted to kill or he wanted gone. And my dad and I were one of those people who were not under his trance. So then I woke up. So you see now why I say good morning, because I just woke up, but I'm not sure if it really is such a quote-unquote good morning because of this dream. It left me a little startled. However, again, I am thankful for another day, and I hope everyone else has a great day today too. Bye-bye, and thanks for letting me share, and I'll talk to you again in the next video, whenever that is. Bye-bye.